Paul Leadley is a university professor at Paris-Saclay and a member of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He joins me now to talk a bit more about COP27. Paul, we have seen so many promises made at so many previous conferences that actually went on to be ignored. Do you really believe these COP conferences can do something to solve the world's most urgent environmental problems?
Well, what we know is that when we first started looking at the national promises in terms of reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, that they were actually much higher than they are now. So it does seem like there is some progress that's being made as countries meet. I guess I'd also add that this is a really complex problem. People have a really hard time understanding these big global problems where the real difficulties are going to come in 1, 2, 3 decades. And so they're very difficult problems to deal with. Clearly, we need to do more, but there's progress.
Paul, one of the trickiest issues at this conference seems to be the topic of reparations for poorer countries to try and make up for loss and damage there from climate change. And for the first time, it's now an official item on the agenda of a COP conference. We just had the French President Emmanuel Macron this morning saying he's in favor of it and encouraging countries like the US and China to get on board. Are you optimistic that some kind of compensation will actually be decided at this conference for those poorer countries?
I don't really know. It's not my specialty, but I certainly hope so, because that's not only going to be a precondition for coming to agreements here at the COP27, but we're going to be following this up with a COP15 on biodiversity in December. And that's also conditioned on the same kinds of problems. And so if we can't resolve this problem of transfers of not only money, but capacity between developed countries and developing countries, we're really going to come to an impasse in terms of all the major environmental issues.
Talk us through who is attending the COP27 this year, and perhaps more crucially, who's not attending.
So we don't have some of the major people showing up. So the Chinese leader is not showing up. The Canadian leader is not showing up. The Australian leader is not showing up. And so we really have many of the major emitters of greenhouse gases who are not showing up to this conference, and that certainly is not a good signal. And again, I bring attention to the couple between climate and biodiversity. Actually, to the biodiversity convention in December, actually, no leaders have actually been invited yet. So it's not a good time for international collaboration.
And in addition to all of that, there has been some controversy surrounding the host country of the conference, Egypt. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I'm afraid I'm really badly placed for that one. I don't know very much about the specific conditions in Egypt. I know what I hear, but I'm not well placed to comment on that.
Well, then just wrap up with this. Why is COP27 in your eyes so important? And do you think it can indeed deliver the necessary actions that are required, or is it, again, simply just more talk and no action?
No, so we're on a pathway where countries are supposed to submit their national action plans, and there are many of them that haven't done that yet, and they need to be more ambitious than they are. So this is a good reminder that next year we're going to do this global stock take, and we need to have a lot more ambition than we currently have. It's really important because we haven't talked a lot about adaptation previously in the COPs. And it's becoming incredibly important. And I think everyone's beginning to realize that we absolutely have to take adaptation much more seriously. There's a UN report that's out that said that we're woefully inadequate in terms of climate adaptation plans. And of course, that's going to be conditioned by discussions around loss and damage and finance, in which many of the what the developing countries are requesting is absolutely justified. They're suffering from the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions that have been made in the past and are continuing to be made by developed and emergent countries.
Paul, thank you for sharing your expertise with us. That's IPCC member Paul Leadley.